Barbarian was already insane, but they finally fixed the bug with the Mantles of the Mountain Fury. The item was supposed to have your Hammer of Ancient explode your earthquakes for trillions of damage. But not all the multipliers were multiplying, not all the earthquakes were counting as they should. It was simply not good. But with the latest patch, that's fixed, and suddenly we're doing up to trillions of damage with shoddy equipment. And since the gameplay loop and skills change quite some, I'll treat it as a new build guide and just break it down step by step by step, how it works, which skills to take, Paragon, gear, everything. The main culprit of the build is the Mantle of the Mountain's Fury. It reads, Hammer of Ancient also forms a line. So you hit it and it goes forward. And in that line, earthquakes it passes through explode for their total damage and are consumed. And since this is working correctly now, you're pretty much zooming through the dungeon, drop earthquakes behind you, turn around, bam, slam the hammer down, the line forms, whoop, 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 the earthquakes explode, and everything just dies for hundreds of billions to trillions of damage. Now you pay close attention because it says earthquakes explode for their total damage, which means we gotta make the earthquakes do the most damage possible. First, the Ugly Bastard's helmet, which says you deal 100% increased fire damage. But we want way more. That's why we take the earthquake aspect for an increased 88% damage on our earthquakes. And our ground stomp is making an earthquake too. That earthquake's base damage is being multiplied upwards and it explodes as its own kind of earthquake with a super banger explosion as well, which gets followed up by the most important aspect, Executioners. This has our earthquakes deal more damage regarding how much strength we have. For every 100 strength, 15% more damage. And our bonus is 585%. Holy hell. Now there's an interesting part, since we got our Whirlwind going as a slashing weapon, and our Hammer of Ancients going as a bludgeoning weapon, and we're continuously swapping between them. This means we've been formerly playing the Elements aspect for a simple 30% bonus damage, but it was only happening every 7 seconds and rotating back and forth. We could consider playing the Battle Mat aspect, gain 32% increased damage and berserking for 4 seconds after swapping weapons 8 times. You do your Whirlwind for an earthquake, you can explode the earthquake, Whirlwind, earthquake, Whirlwind, earthquake, Whirlwind, earthquake. We're continuously swapping our weapons. And since this is like only active for 7 seconds and then for 7 seconds not active, I might be better off swapping my weapons back and forth. And to make the earthquake deal even more damage, then we get the most explosion possible from the mantle. That would be the aspect of the incendiary fissure that makes sense with the Ugly Bastard helmet, because your earthquakes deal 120% increased damage and their damage is converted into fire. And since the Ugly Bastard did the 100% fire damage, that works perfect. Lastly, the aspect of the Bulcatus for another 84% earthquake damage. And that's already what we can do with our equipment to truly have it escalate. Our skills and paragons will do even more. Let me show you the gameplay loop with a 100 pit. I've personally done everything up to 115, but I haven't pushed further as my gear is not 12 out of 12 masterworked, and I didn't see the need to honestly push further. You're now running in, casting your shouts, dropping your earthquakes, activating your Zerker, and then you can just, boom, explode the earthquake. Keep running, explode the earthquake, keep running through everything, drop some shouts, Zerker, explode, had a damage reduction dude, reduce the damage, boom. And that's hundreds of billions of damage. Run through, and since you're forming a line, again, you don't have to like walk back into it, it just explodes earthquakes in a line. So you just do this, and then just move on. And that's you, zooming through. Now, how are we getting our earthquakes? We're playing the Igni rune that is storing offering, and every 0.3 seconds, we're pretty much pressing our button to release the Igni rune and get an earthquake. Earthquake, 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 and so on. Works really good. I tried to use the mobility version with a lunging strike, but for that, I would have to change my gear to attack speed. So that I didn't want to do, since tapping the Whirlwind button does not require attack speed, right? It's just you tapping the button. It's not actually going you for an animation, but if you do the lunging strike, in order to have it faster and get more earthquakes, you would have to lunge faster. Now this gameplay loop is vastly more fun in my eyes, as you finally have a more active component added to you just to doing earthquakes and then waiting for them to do the damage. Now, you just erupt the damage faster, And you don't also have to wait for them to like form or stay up for a few seconds, because the Hammer of the Ancient explodes the whole total damage it would have dealt anyways. Okay, so you don't have to wait like 21, 22, 23. You can pretty much put down an earthquake and instantly explode it. Obviously, it helps if you like kind of stack earthquakes on top of each other, and then you have all of them explode into each other. But technically, you could just drop one earthquake and then explode that one earthquake. Here, one earthquake and explode that one. And it's already 225 million, right? so you like one is enough. Like you could literally do the weapon swap. I said one earthquake, explosion. One earthquake, explosion, and you're going on. Just more fun to stack multiple and just have all the values go off. Like here, one earthquake and explode it, right? Good damage, but you'd rather have like all the earthquakes below him that are stacking up for billions over billions, billions of damage, and then you're just boom, just annihilate him with that swing-a-ding-ding-ding. You also want to make sure to have as much fury as possible, but that will be explained in the skill section for the Hammer of Ancients. This is, by the way, done with not even 100 glyphs. They're all sitting around 70, 72, 75, 77, 91. Fantastic. Since we're playing Hammer of the Ancients now, we had to get rid of a skill. And that was a little bit annoying because that was our Rallying Cry, which pretty much stole away our Fortify source. We found a solution though. 2 points into Launching Strike, then we get the Whirlwind with the bonus bleeding. The bonus bleeding is needed for some damage reduction later on. We get the Hammer of Ancients, 10 bonus points from the Mantle. Together with Hammer of Ancient gains 5% critical strike damage and chance for every 10 fury you had when cast. 8 critical strikes knock down enemies. This is just for more damage as you're slamming the hammer down and exploding the earthquakes. And if you overpower, we would overall do more damage. We get our Ground Stomp with the Ground Stomp cooldown reduction that we always have the Ground Stomp kind of up. Only 1 point in Challenging Shout, the further points are not needed. 1 point into Warcry with the Power Warcry and the Hans Warcry for the Berserking. We get Raid Leader now for the heals, together with the bonus damage reduction on our enemies and the movement speed. Then, finally, Defensive Stance is working. Yes! Points into Defensive Stance. While fortified, you gain additionally 16% damage reduction and you heal for 4% maximum life every second. Ta-da! Which also means we have to be fortified though. Then down here, you want to have the 3 points into the Wallop. That's important as our bludgeoning weapon for the Hammer of Ancient just deals more damage and then the explosion just goes ham. You want as many ranks into Heavy Hitter as possible. That is over the Tempering because that makes our Earthquakes do more damage. And if our Earthquakes do more damage, you can explode total higher Earthquakes. This Heavy Hitter can go up to, I think the maximum I've seen was 24. You notice how few points I do pretty much have in. Then Wrath of the Berserker together with the Unconstrained for that super damage bonus. Now to the in-depth gear breakdown. For the Ugly Bastard Helmet, I wanted a greater affix on Wrath of the Berserker cooldown. That I really always have Wrath of the Berserker up, since it will make us unstoppable. And our Berserking damage is multiplicative increased as we spam away with the Whirlwind. And as a second, you need to look out for that 100% fire damage. That should be maxed. For the Mantles of the Mountain Fury, you want the double damage as a greater affix, and you want to masterwork it as well. The actual percentage too slow can be as low as you want to. You really just need that double damage. Then we get our Fist of Fate, which will kind of randomize our damage. It could lead to absolutely insanity values or some lower values. In total, it's a 60% to 80% damage buff. I like it, especially since it has a very high critical strike chance. We get attack speed, we get lucky hit chance. We can crowd control our enemies with lucky hit. It just works nicely for the build. Now my pants are still the Tacet of the Dawning Sky, simply because I could not find a pants with a greater affix to resistance to all elements. Yeah. Also gives me tons of movement speed, so that's quite fine as I'm zooming over the map. For the boots, we're playing Concussive Strike as we daze our enemies to deal 22% more damage. We also have Fury per second as that works really well with our Whirlwind to always have us Whirlwind up with a greater affix to Strength. And that's what you really want to have, greater affixes to Strength on all your equipment, because more Strength is just straight up more damage. When we have 540% now, and if I put these boots on, we're going up to 580, as we also have strength multipliers running. Movement speed and earthquake size. Yes, earthquake size. More size, more better. For the weapon, greater affix to strength, and then a 15% chance to restore resource. That 15% chance works really well to, in between with a lucky hit, just zoom your resource back up. Works really nice in case you kind of run out if the ground stomp, if your shouts are not enough. The Groundstorm can give you 60 Fury too, and it's kind of woven into the gameplay loop. Now the chance for Earthquakes to cast twice, mandatory, and you need damage to close on this weapon, as you need damage to close on the others and damage while berserking. Now keep in mind that the damage while berserking and damage while close on the weapons needs you to hit certain breakpoints. The damage to close should be at 450%, and the damage while berserking needs to be around 550 to give you the maximum in your Paragon board. I have it exactly the wrong way around, which means I could retemper this weapon, but that would be kind of like a bummer right now, because if I miss the temper, I just lose the weapon. We're playing the Earthquake aspect for that huge multiplicative damage, and I'm missing pretty much almost 40% damage here. Now on the weapon, we get that weapon swap aspect I talked about. It's the battle mat one for swapping in between our weapons back and forth, damage while berserking, max life strength, critical strike damage, and then you temper heavy hitter. And if I masterwork this weapon right now, I want to hit heavy hitter. That is the skill, which increases our ultimate skill damage, right? Like more heavy hitter, more skill damage, it's crazy. And every point is 15%. So 3 points non-masterworked, 45% bonus. When this one is 4 points already, that's 60% bonus damage with greater affix to strength. And that is then for the Executioner's aspect to give us so much. It currently has damage while Wrath of the Zerkers active. Here, I'm missing just a huge chunk of damage while berserking. But I have masterworked heavy hitter already. Cannot reroll this one. Lastly, we get a sword for the slashing attacks. That then works with our whirlwind for the bleeding. Strength, max life crit. Earthquake duration. Longer earthquake duration. Very good. Damage to close enemies for the multiplier later on. And then the aspect of the incendiary fissure for the bonus damage multiplier and the fire damage conversion. Now my rings are running the resistance to all elements, greater affix with the maximum life and the strength. The maximum life in this case should be critical strike chance, because I'm only sitting at 75% critical strike chance with the rune that gives me more crit chance as I'm traveling. So travel 5 meters, get more crit. So that is absolutely wanted. Then Wrath of the Zerker cooldown, damage to close or berserking, whatever you need. And I get casting an ultimate skill, which I always do, increases my damage by 30% for 8 seconds. If you cast your Wrath of the Berserker every 8 seconds, you permanently have 30% damage increase. Second ring has the critical strike chance and the strength. The maximum life is okayish to have here, doesn't hurt. Wrath of the Zerker, damage while berserking in this case, but a low roll sadly. And whenever you cast a shout skill, its active cooldown is reduced by 20% per nearby enemy. Just making sure that we can get our shouts more often shouting. Lastly, the amulet. I got counter-offensive 3 ranks, which is good. And then we got 32.2% strength. Yep. That is absolutely amazing. You want that bonus strength multiplier as a greater affix. And you also want to masterwork it as often as possible, optimally 3 times, as this just gets the Executioner's aspect super high. I love it. Then Leap creates Earthquakes. We don't use Leap, but we got that 84% bonus damage. Fantastic. Earthquake going bonkers. As our expertise, we're using the Axe. And yes, we're missing 10% increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies. Right now, we have it ranked 3. It's not like that we need it, even when clearing a 120 pit. Ta-da. For the Merc, we currently have Variana to move even faster. Could replace that through Subo for that 25% crit damage. And we get Rahir to cast the Bastion that we can just stand below his Bastion and not take any damage. Now to the Paragon board and an explanation on the multipliers. First, we get here our Rumble Glyph with 105 strength. Every strength node I could possibly take. That gives us another 1,200% earthquake damage and an earthquake damage multiplier, plus another 50% damage multiplier the more earthquakes we have. Yeah, great, right? That brings us into the Blood Rage board. And as you can see, we have a 40% damage multiplier. It goes up to 45%, which means our berserking damage bonus needs actually to be at 450, not 550. Made a slight oopsie there. In this board, we're playing the Challenger Glyph, which multiplies up our strength nodes. And you might notice how few strength nodes I've taken so far here. This is going to be the next thing I'm going to flash out completely, as every point of strength just simply gives us vastly more damage on the earthquakes, as it also gets multiplied up. First by the Challenger Glyph, 8, but then by the 32.4% of our amulet. Next up, Weapon Master. Swapping weapons grants you 8% of your maximum fury. This is important as we're swapping our weapons back and forth with the Hammer of the Ancients. That gives us some fury back, to sustain our fury. And we're playing the Ire Glyph with 105 strength here as well for more damage while berserking. And with the damage while berserking, we're getting the Blood Rage further up easily. Downwards into the Force of Nature board that gives our earthquakes 200% more damage with the damage while close. We can increase the earthquake damage here as well. And we get the Martial Glyph. After casting a shout skill, the active cooldown of every other non-shout skill is reduced to pretty much get our Zerker up faster again. Sadly, we only have 2 shouts now. Lastly, the Decimator board. Each time you make an enemy vulnerable, your damage is increased by 20% for 5 seconds. And overpowering a vulnerable enemy grants an additional 20% bonus for 5 seconds. Overpowers with all the damage we're doing just happen automatically. Lastly, the Wrath Glyph. For every 5 decks, we do more critical strike damage. Then we get critical strike damage bonus multiplier. Now, our critical strike damage bonus is not insane, but that's a free multiplier to have. But skills that critical strike generate 3 fury. This does help too with maintaining our overall wrath. It's not 100% needed, but it smoothens the build further. Now, we're still lacking one thing, and that would be Fortify, because we lost our shout. First, we played the Cycle to consistently get heals. That's amazing. It works so good. You're going through your enemies, heals. You're never going to be in danger of dying. The second thing we're playing is the Hex of Whispers, because a single Hex of Whispers may only be transferred 6 times, afterward it cleanses all negative effects from you and grants you Fortify. This is pretty much our source of Fortify now, and it works wonders. Together with the Aura specialization for that bonus critical strike damage, which seems multiplicative over additive. And then we're playing the Aura of Lament. And the Aura of Lament right now for me is not level 15, so I only get 1 instead of 2 Auras of Lament. But it gives you primary resource, which again makes it easier to just simply maintain the Whirlwind spam. Now we get Shaken Soul for the Psyche effect, making enemies vulnerable. Soul Harvest to suck the main stat out for more main stat, for more strength, for more earthquake damage. And that's it. That's the awesome updated Earthquake Barbarian for you. Go out there, smash everything into smithereens. Tell me if you knew all things in this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.